The Department of Defense took offensive actions in defense of our personnel and interests in Iraq by launching F-15 Strike Eagles against 5 targets associated with Kataib Hezbollah, which is an Iranian-sponsored Shiite militia group. We will take additional actions as necessary to ensure that we act in our own self-defense and we deter further bad behavior from militia groups or from Iran.
That, of course, is Secretary of Defense Mark Esper after U.S. airstrikes on Iranian-backed militias in Iraq and Syria this weekend. Those in retaliation for that rocket attack that killed an American defense contractor and wounded 4 of our U.S. troops in northern Iraq. Joining us now is retired Marine Corps Lieutenant Colonel Dakota Wood. For more on this, he's a senior research fellow for defense programs at the Heritage Foundation. So, Colonel, is it about time that we struck back at the Iranian-backed forces that are trying to kill us?
Well, this has been a long-running thing. I mean, ever since our first days in Iraq back in 2003, these Shiite militias get support from Iran. Iran has its own regional interests in the region. It has an extraordinarily heavy influence on Iraqi politics. Certainly, you've seen its growth from Iran through northern Iraq and into Syria. So this has been a long-running issue. Iranian-backed militia groups attacked U.S. forces throughout our stay, 2003 to 2011. In Iraq, so really it's nothing unusual. The most recent thing was this heavy round of 30 or so rockets into a base occupied by U.S. forces that are assisting Iraqi forces at Iraq's invitation. And force protection is always the #1 priority for any U.S. commander in charge of U.S. forces. So the response was appropriate. It's a signal to Iran to hold back those groups that it supports from attacking U.S. forces, and the U.S. reserves the right to conduct such defensive strikes at any point.
We can't forget that Tehran has American blood on its hands. And this morning, Secretary of State Mike Pompeo was on Fox and Friends. He said the president has a lot of patience, but after 11 attacks, the U.S. is striking back. Here's also what he said about the Iranian people's efforts to try and topple that regime.
Look at what the Iranian people are telling their leaders today when they march in the streets. I think the Iranian people understand that their leadership's activities need to change, and we have been incredibly supportive of this effort for the Iranian people to get what it is that they so richly deserve, and we will continue to support the Iranian people.
Can we change Iranian behavior?
Well, it's been ongoing for 40 years. I mean, since the mullahs took over at the overthrow of the Shah. So again, there's a pattern that stretches back decades. The Iranian people, if they want to change in leadership, they have to create that from inside. It's not going to happen from an external invasion, despite what the Iranian regime says in a lot of its public statements. So the Iranian people need to figure out whether they want to be part of a productive global community, whether they want to have good trade relationships, tourism, all those things that come with responsible behavior, or allow the Iranian mullahs to maintain control as they have for 4 decades.
Yeah, a lot of those the demonstrations have been continuing on the streets, widespread throughout the country, and astoundingly, 1,500 protesters, they say, have been savagely, brutally cut down and killed on the streets of Tehran and the other Iranian cities. Go ahead.
Yeah, it's an extraordinary thing when people at risk to their own lives and safety. I mean, they know the pattern of conduct by the religious police and others, and for them to take to the streets, this is a very serious, important topic to them, where they're willing to hazard their own livelihood, the members of their family, and themselves as well. So I think we need to pay attention to this. We need to provide political, rhetorical support. You're not going to see Americans on the ground or anything like that, but it's extraordinary to see this embrace of freedom, individualism, democratic reforms of some type, and we should want to see this continue.
Well, you talk about democratic reforms and supporting them. What should we do? Here is Maryam Rajavi, head of the largest Iranian opposition group, the National Council of Resistance of Iran, with that very call to the Iranian people.
This uprising will continue until freedom and democracy are established in Iran. The regime considers murder and suppression as its only means to remain in power.
What should President Trump do that President Obama missed during the Green Revolution?
Be much more explicit in our support for this kind of a movement. I mean, authoritarian regimes do not give up power willingly. You're not going to see it in North Korea. You won't see it in Iran. You certainly didn't see it during the heyday of the Soviet Union, Ceausescu. I mean, all these other authoritarians over time do not willingly give up power. So it has to be an uprising of the people. And I think where the United States is in support of these sorts of things, just as we were leading democratic reforms and championing these sort of peace and freedom movements throughout the Cold War, we need to continue with that and be much more explicit. If you recall, there was a bit of an uprising along these lines during the Obama tenure, and we held back and we refused to give that kind of rhetorical support that they desperately wanted and actually needed.
Yeah, Lieutenant Colonel Dakota Wood, wise words there for the Iranian people. Thank you.
Thank you.